Gone fishing. Gray Range ended the Helix Meridian case in a room that smelled of expensive flowers, old money, and fear. The flowers were unnecessary. So was the room. Corporate fraud, in Gray's experience, did not become more dignified because the walls were polished blackwood and the tea was served in cups thin enough to make a man nervous. Theft remained theft. Murder remained murder. Betrayal remained betrayal, whether it wore a silk jacket or a bloodstained work shirt. The board of Helix Meridian Resource Group sat around an oval table pretending not to sweat. Gray stood at the far end with his hands folded before him, plain coat dusty from 3 transit hubs, 2 refinery moons, and 1 very unpleasant mining station where someone had tried to kill him with an elevator. Greta's voice murmured in a tiny receiver tucked behind his ear. Their legal counsel's heart rate has increased by 31%. Gray looked at the woman seated beside the chairman. That'll be Mrs. Vale. Correct. The chairman, Orlon DeWitt, had the smooth face of a man who believed consequences were for subcontractors. His wife, Maurice, sat 3 chairs away from him, silver hair pinned beautifully, expression carved from ice. Beside her sat DeWitt's chief financial officer, a handsome younger man named Cal Renner, whose tailored jacket could not quite hide the bruise along his throat. Gray had noticed it 2 days ago. So had Maurice. So, eventually, had the dead man's autopsy report. Mr. Range, DeWitt said, with practiced irritation, you were hired to locate missing extraction revenues. Not to dramatize internal matters. Gray nodded. Found the revenues. A flicker went through the room. 312 million credits, Gray continued. Moved through shell carriers, disguised as equipment losses, then laundered through a relief foundation that never delivered relief to anybody. DeWitt's mouth tightened. Baseless. Gray tapped the table. A hologram opened above it, payment chains, transit logs, false invoices, coded personal messages, and 1 reconstructed security recording from a private berth on Lasker Station. Cal Renner went pale. Maurice DeWitt did not. Gray glanced at her. Mrs. DeWitt found the theft first. She confronted your CFO. Then discovered the affair. The board went perfectly silent. DeWitt turned slowly toward his wife. Maurice's voice was calm. You were sloppy, Orlon. Cal swallowed. Maurice. Do not, she said. Gray continued, because the facts did not care whether anyone in the room was emotionally prepared for them. Your husband intended to blame Mr. Renner for the missing funds and arrange a quiet resignation. Mrs. DeWitt intended to expose both of you. Mr. Renner, realizing he was about to lose the money, the woman, and possibly his freedom, contacted Station Auditor Pell. The hologram shifted to a smiling middle-aged auditor with tired eyes. Pell was murdered 6 hours later, Gray said. Official cause, pressure door malfunction. DeWitt said nothing. Cal said too much by breathing too fast. Gray looked at him. You didn't kill Pell. Cal's eyes lifted, desperate. But you opened the door override for the person who did. The room seemed to shrink. Maurice looked at her husband at last. Gray brought up the final recording. Blurred, damaged, almost useless when Helix Meridian had handed it over. But Gray Range made his living from almost useless things. He had rebuilt reflection angles from polished wall panels, recovered audio from vibration patterns in a drink glass, and matched the killer's gait to a private medical file hidden in executive insurance archives. Orlon DeWitt watched himself walk toward Auditor Pell's quarters. The chairman aged 10 years before the recording ended. Security entered quietly. Real security, not corporate security. Federation officers with patient faces and restraint cuffs. Maurice DeWitt did not weep when they took her husband. Cal Renner did. That seemed about right to Gray. Outside the tower, rain slid down the glass skin of the city. Gray stood beneath the entry canopy while the arrest transports lifted into the gray afternoon. Greta said, You have received 4 new case requests. Decline. 1 is marked urgent. They always are. One involves a missing ambassador. Especially decline. A pause. You are tired, Greta said. Gray watched the rain strike the pavement. He thought of Auditor Pell, who had tried to do the right thing and died for it. He thought of Maurice DeWitt, whose revenge had still left her lonely. He thought of Cal Renner, who had mistaken desire for loyalty and learned the difference too late. I'm going fishing, Gray said. Actual fishing? Actual fishing. For how long? 2 weeks. Greta processed this with the solemn gravity of a machine considering war. I will prepare the long look for atmospheric camping, river access, and your usual doomed optimism. Gray smiled faintly and stepped into the rain. Pack the old hat, he said. Then he left Helix Meridian, murder, fraud, and betrayal behind him and went looking for a world where the fish did not lie. Gray Range had chosen the planet because no one important had ever cared about it. That was, in his experience, the highest compliment a planet could receive. Its registry name was Pelican's Rest, which meant some survey clerk had once either seen a pelican, missed a pelican, or badly misunderstood a long-necked native fishbird. The locals, a scattered handful of homesteaders, called it Blue Water because the rivers were blue and the lakes were bluer, and because honest names often outlasted official ones. It had no great mineral wealth. No ancient ruins. No sacred diplomatic zones. No disputed orbital corridors. No hidden military value that anyone had discovered yet. The gravity sat comfortably near Earth normal. The weather was rude but predictable. The forests were broad and green and smelled of rain, bark, and mud. And the fishing was excellent. Gray knew this because he had been here once before on a retrieval job involving a missing inheritance drive, a forged death certificate, and a retired accountant who had decided to spend his stolen fortune building elaborate wooden docks for strangers. Gray had found the drive, returned most of the money, and accepted as payment one old paper map marked with 3 fishing spots in pencil. You had to respect a payment like that. Now the long look rested half-hidden beneath the branches of a valley forest, its hull wearing a matte brown camouflage skin that made it look less like a ship and more like an unusually thoughtful boulder. Morning fog clung to the river below. Little silver insects hovered above the reeds. Somewhere in the trees, something with 6 lungs and no sense of rhythm sang at the sunrise. Gray stood on the riverbank in worn boots, an old canvas jacket, and a battered hat that had belonged to his grandfather. A fishing rod rested in his hand. For the first time in 7 months, nobody was missing. Nobody had hired him to find a kidnapped witness. Nobody had asked him to reconstruct a smuggler route from 3 melted transponder fragments and 1 drunk dockworker's memory. Nobody was offering double rates for discretion or triple rates for revenge. Nobody was lying to him in a conference room with expensive tea. He had told the last client, very clearly, I am unavailable for 2 weeks. The client had said, but this is urgent. Gray had said, everything is urgent to whoever owns the problem. Then he had left. Above him, the ship's external speaker clicked softly. Gray, said Greta, the long look's AI, your line has drifted 3 degrees left. Gray did not look up. Fish don't care. I care. You don't fish. I supervise. You hover. I maintain a comprehensive protective and operational oversight environment. Gray reeled in slightly. Hovering. There was a pause. I am prepared, Greta said, to allow the term under protest. Gray smiled faintly. That was when the sky exploded. It did not explode dramatically, as in cheap entertainment dramas where the heavens split open and music rises in foolish defiance of physics. It simply flashed white in the upper atmosphere, a thin, silent flower of violence. A moment later, the sound reached the valley, a flat, distant crack like a mountain-sized branch breaking. Gray's hand tightened on the rod. Greta said, orbital detonation detected. Natural? No. Local traffic? No registered vessels in system except the long look. Gray looked up through the trees. A second light streaked across the pale morning sky, falling too fast and too crooked. Escape pod? He asked. Life pod. Damaged. Entering uncontrolled descent. Estimated impact, 9 kilometers east-northeast. Gray sighed. The fish, with the ancient selfish wisdom of fish everywhere, took the opportunity to bite. The rod bent. Gray looked at the river. Then at the burning streak in the sky. Then at the river again. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. Greta's voice warmed with something dangerously close to satisfaction. Shall I secure your fishing equipment? Gray set the rod down carefully, because his grandfather had raised him right and because some things deserved respect even when fate was being unreasonable. I'm on vacation, he said. Yes. I told everyone. Yes. No new jobs. Also yes. The falling life pod vanished behind the ridge. Several seconds later, a dull impact rolled through the valley. Greta said nothing. Gray rubbed both hands down his face. Get the med kit ready. I already have. Warm up the drones. Already launched. Gray started up the bank toward the ship. And don't sound pleased about this. I have no idea what you mean. You always like it when I have to be heroic. You become less irritable afterward. That is not true. It is statistically overwhelming. Gray climbed the ramp into the long look, still smelling of cold river water and fish bait, and the vacation ended exactly the way most of Gray Range's vacations ended. With someone falling out of the sky. The life pod had punched through half a stand of blue-needled trees before burying itself in a mossy ravine. Steam rose from its cracked hull. The impact scar smoked. The forest around it had gone silent in the way forests do when something large has arrived without permission. Gray approached on foot. That was not because he lacked drones, scanners, or ship-mounted recovery systems. He had all of those. The long look had already mapped the pod, checked for radiation, sniffed for toxins, identified hull alloys, and sent 3 spider drones creeping through the undergrowth. Gray approached on foot because frightened survivors sometimes shot drones. They also sometimes shot rescuers, but at least then he could have a conversation first. He stopped 20 meters from the pod. Hello, he called. My name is Gray Range. I saw you come down. I'm here to help. The pod hissed. A figure shifted in the shadow of the open hatch. Gray had seen Varelians before. Most people in his line of work had. They were tall, graceful, and unnervingly quiet when they wanted to be. This one emerged slowly, one long hand braced against the pod's frame. She was sea green, with faint bioluminescent veins glowing beneath smooth translucent skin. Her large dark eyes were too calm for someone who had just survived orbital betrayal and a bad landing. 2 flexible sensory crests stirred behind her head, moving in tiny, precise arcs. She wore a torn flight underlayer and the expression of a person deciding which lie was least dangerous. Thank goodness, she said softly. I was afraid no one lived nearby. Her galactic standard was excellent. Too excellent. Farm girls did not usually speak with diplomatic academy consonants. Gray kept his hands visible. You injured? No. I mean, yes. A little. She touched her side half a second after saying it, which meant the injury was either fake or not the first thing on her mind. My ship malfunctioned. That so? Yes. What kind of ship? She glanced at the wreckage, then back at him. Agricultural transport. Gray looked at the pod. The pod looked back, in the silent language of military-grade stealth ceramics, classified ablative foam, and emergency systems designed by people who expected assassination attempts before breakfast. Agricultural, Gray said. Yes. Carrying turnips? Her eyes narrowed very slightly. Educational equipment. I was traveling to university. Of course. My family will be worried. I expect somebody is. She heard the little hook in that sentence. Her sensory crests tilted toward him. "And you are?" she asked. "Fishing. That is not an occupation. It was this morning." Her gaze moved over him, old jacket, plain trousers, worn boots, gray in the beard, tired eyes, patient hands. He saw her catalog him. Rural settler. Independent. Human. Dangerous, but perhaps not politically connected. Useful, if handled properly. She smiled faintly. It was a lovely smile. It was also a tool. "My name is Lessa," she said. "No, it isn't." The smile vanished. Gray shrugged. "Sorry." Reflex. For a long second, neither moved. Then she swayed. It was a small thing. Perfectly timed, perhaps. But the blood darkening the torn fabric at her side was real enough, and her pupils had begun to widen. Gray stepped forward slowly. "You can lie to me after I stop the bleeding." "I am not." "You are." "But later." She hesitated. Pride warred with survival. Survival won, as it usually does among professionals. She let him help her. The moment Gray's hand touched her arm, her crests flared. She felt the old scars under his sleeve, the density of earthborn bone, the steady pulse that did not quicken when she leaned closer as if preparing to strike. She felt, too, the small field distortions from 3 hidden drones, the scan net above the trees, and the faint encrypted whisper between man and ship. Her eyes sharpened. "You are not a fisherman," she said. Gray supported her weight and started walking. "Not today, apparently." The long look did not impress people at first glance. Gray liked that about her. She was not sleek in the Astery fashion. She did not glow with Varelian elegance or Brindlefolk enthusiasm. She was compact, stubborn-looking, and built around the philosophy that survival was mostly a matter of asking inconvenient questions before explosions happened. Ashari Ven, who was absolutely not named Lessa, noticed too much the moment she came aboard. The air pressure was fractionally adjustable by compartment. The corridor angles gave defenders clean lines of fire and intruders awkward ones. 2 wall panels were decorative lies. The ship AI watched her with enough attention to feel personal. "Guest cabin," Gray said, guiding her through the narrow passage. "Medical kit is in the wall. Sit down. I do not wish to impose. You crashed 9 kilometers from my breakfast. I apologize." "Don't." Wasn't much of a breakfast. The cabin was small but warm. A bunk folded from one wall. A small table hummed out from another. The medical kit opened before Gray touched it. A woman's voice filled the room. "Welcome aboard the Long Look. Please state your full legal identity, affiliations, medical allergies, known enemies, and whether any hostile parties are likely to arrive before lunch." Ashari blinked. Gray closed his eyes. "Greta." "What?" "I am being hospitable. You are interrogating a wounded guest." "I included medical allergies." Ashari's gaze moved toward the ceiling. "You are the ship intelligence." "I am Greta." "A pleasure." "That remains to be determined." Gray took a sterile patch from the kit. "Ignore her." "I am impossible to ignore by design," Greta said. Ashari sat on the bunk. "I am Lessa March. I was traveling from—" Greta interrupted. "False." Ashari went still. Gray gave the ceiling a tired look. "Greta." Her stress scent increased 22%. Her pulse pattern changed. Her crests angled toward the emergency exits. Also, there is no Lessa Mar registered in any educational transit database within 3 sectors. I told you to restrict database pulls while we're grounded. I restricted them to databases I already stole last year. That is not what restricted means." Ashari watched this exchange with growing interest. Gray cleaned the wound. "This will sting. I have endured pain. Still stings. It did. She did not flinch, which told him little. Professionals often made a point of not flinching. He sealed the cut with a biofoam patch and watched the color in her vein stabilize from faint blue to a steadier green. "You need rest," he said. "I need to contact my family." "Family?" "Yes. On the farm." Her eyes met his. "You are suspicious." "Ma'am, I reconstruct lies for a living." A silence fell. Greta said, "He is very good at it." Gray pointed one finger upward. "Not helping." Ashari studied him. "Gray range." He looked at her. "You said your name earlier." "Gray range." "Independent tracer." "Retrieval specialist." "Quiet handoffs, ransom communications, missing persons, corporate disputes." "You found the heir of Meridian Station after 3 governments and 2 crime syndicates failed." Gray stared at her for a moment. Then he said, "University farm girl keeps up with trade news." I read widely. "Sure." "You are also known," Ashari continued, "for returning clients alive whenever possible and evidence intact whenever inconvenient." Greta made a pleased sound. "That was well phrased." "Do not encourage her," Gray said. Ashari leaned back slightly. Her voice softened. "Mr. Range, I truly do need to send a message. And I truly need to know whether sending that message brings trouble to my valley." She smiled again, smaller this time. "Less tool. More admission. Trouble is already coming." Gray sighed and sat on the little stool opposite her. "Yeah," he said. "I figured." Her real name came out 6 hours later. Not because Gray forced it out. He did not threaten. He did not lock her in the cabin, though Greta suggested it twice and once began designing a guest safety containment protocol before Gray vetoed it. He gave Ashari food. That worked better than interrogation. The soup was simple, printed broth base improved with real vegetables from the ship's cold locker, river herbs from Gray's pack, and flatbread warmed on an old iron pan he insisted on keeping aboard despite Greta's claim that it was inefficient cookware from a dramatic species. Ashari held the bowl in both hands, breathing the steam. "This smells alive," she said. "Food does that sometimes. Not on courier stations. Those don't have food. They have edible scheduling errors." She took a careful sip. Her eyes widened slightly. Gray pretended not to notice. They ate in the small galley with the ship dimmed around them and rain beginning to tick against the hull. Outside, Pelican's rest turned gray and green beneath the storm. "My name," she said at last, "is Ashari Ven." Gray nodded once. "Silent current?" Her crests froze. He spooned more soup into his bowl. "Had to be somebody like that. You know of us." "I know there's a Varelian Navigation Advisory Bureau that somehow keeps appearing in places right before wars fail to happen." "That is a generous interpretation." "Is it wrong?" "No." "Then I'll take generous." She looked down into the soup. "My ship was the Narrow Tide. I was carrying route falsification evidence. Someone inside a joint navigation council has been selling corridor ghosts." Gray's face changed. "Only a little. Most people would have missed it." Ashari did not. "Corridor ghosts?" he asked. "False safe routes. Artificially authenticated. A fleet follows them during emergency redeployment and emerges inside a gravity shear, a minefield, or a Carvax-influenced zone." Her voice remained soft, but the bioluminescence beneath her skin dimmed with anger. "Subtle mass murder. Disguised as accident." Gray set his spoon down. "Who bought them?" "I do not know all of them. I know one faction. Varelian separatists tied to Ascendancy sympathizers. They believe controlled catastrophe will force our people into a more optimized defensive posture." "Carvax thinking," Gray said. "Almost. The Carvax optimize without hatred. These people hate very efficiently. Rain hissed down the hole. Greta spoke quietly. There are 3 unregistered vessels at the outer edge of the system. Gray pushed his bowl away. Ashari closed her eyes for half a breath. They found the pod. No, Gray said. They found the explosion, then started searching probable descent arcs. You sound certain. It's what I do. She opened her eyes. Can we run? Maybe. Will we? Gray stood. Not yet. Greta's voice sharpened. Gray. I know. You are on vacation. I was. You promised me 12 days without gunfire. I promised myself. You told me. That's different. Ashari rose carefully, one hand against her side. Mr. Range, I did not intend to bring violence here. Most people don't intend to bring violence anywhere. They pack it badly and it leaks. A tiny, surprised amusement flickered through her veins. Do you always speak this way? Only when my fishing trip gets invaded by assassins. The first hunter came wearing a rescue beacon. That was clever. Not brilliant, but clever enough to kill ordinary people. The beacon dropped into the valley at dusk, broadcasting a distress call in 3 languages and 1 emergency compression code. It claimed to be from a civilian surveyor injured during atmospheric descent. It landed 2 ridges away from the long look, just far enough to make walking plausible and drone recovery tempting. Gray watched the signal from the cockpit. Ashari stood behind him, one hand resting lightly against the wall. Her crests moved in slow, listening arcs. It is bait, she said. Yep. The carrier signal is too clean. Yep. There is a second pulse hidden beneath the civilian code. Tracker handshake. You saw that? Gray nodded. She looked at him for a long moment. You are very difficult to underestimate. People manage. Greta displayed a terrain map. I recommend orbital departure. No. I expected that. I recommend remaining aboard under stealth. No. I also expected that. I recommend allowing me to vent sedative gas into the guest cabin so our guest does not complicate tactical movement. Ashari's crests rose. Gray said, absolutely not. I would use a gentle concentration. No. You never let me solve social problems. Correct. Ashari's mouth twitched. Gray opened a side compartment and removed an old projectile rifle, a compact pulse pistol, 2 drone tags, and a rolled brown rain cloak. Ashari watched the rifle. That is primitive. Reliable. It fires metal. Fast metal. Against shielded professionals? Gray checked the chamber. Most personal shields are tuned for directed energy. Fast metal makes them nervous. Humans, she murmured. Yep. She extended one long hand. I am coming with you. You're injured. I am useful. That's not the same thing. I can hear pressure changes in the soil, smell hot circuitry, detect stress chemistry, and identify concealed weapon capacitors through wall panels. Gray considered. Greta said, she is not exaggerating. I know. You should still tell her no. Gray gave Ashari the rain cloak. Stay behind me unless you have a better idea. I often do. Then mention it before I get shot. I will try. They left through the lower hatch into the rain. The forest had gone dark and wet, full of dripping leaves and the soft sucking sound of mud under boots. Gray moved like a man who knew forests were not scenery. He chose roots over leaves, stones over puddles, and pauses over haste. Ashari followed with uncanny silence, her long feet finding balance where a human would have slipped. Halfway to the beacon, she touched his sleeve. 3, she breathed. Ahead. 1 above. 2 flanking. Gray crouched beside a fallen log. You can tell? 1 has an anxious digestive rhythm. 1 has a shield emitter with an uneven pulse. The one above is irritated. Gray glanced upward. A shimmer clung to a branch 30 meters ahead. Sniper, he said. Yes. Greta? In his earpiece, Greta answered, drone in position. Mark. A firefly-sized drone lit the sniper's position for half a second. Gray fired once. The old rifle cracked through the rain. The shimmer fell out of the tree with a surprised and undignified thud. Ashari stared. Fast metal, Gray said. The forest erupted. Pulse fire tore through the brush. Gray shoved Ashari behind a mossy boulder as blue-white bolts hissed overhead. He rolled, fired twice, moved again before return fire found him. Ashari pressed one hand to the ground. Left one is advancing, she said. Heavy boots. Right one is circling wide. Can you blind right? With what? Gray tossed her a drone tag. Press the gray side twice. Throw it high. She did. The tag burst into a cloud of glittering microreflectors. The right side hunter's sensors screamed with false targets. He fired wildly. Gray shot the left side hunter through the knee joint of his armor. The man went down cursing in Varelian. Ashari heard the accent and went still. Gray noticed. Friend? No. Former friend? No. Worse? She did not answer. The right side hunter broke from cover, trying to reposition. Ashari stepped out before Gray could stop her. Her posture changed. Until that moment, she had played the wounded passenger, the displaced student, the careful guest. Now she became something else entirely. Still soft. Still quiet. But every motion fit into a design too precise to be accidental. Keldo Van, she called through the rain. The hunter froze. You were assigned to Northern Current Analysis, she said. You dislike deep pressure work. You bribed your way into diplomatic route mapping. You always breathe through your left neck slit when lying. Gray murmured, that's personal. The hunter shouted, traitor! Ashari tilted her head. You sold evacuation corridors to people who intend to feed refugee fleets into engineered disasters. We are saving Varelia from weakness. No, she said. You are selling fear and calling it structure. Kel raised his weapon. Gray shot it out of his hands. The old projectile round shattered the emitter housing. Kel yelped and stumbled back. Gray rose from cover. I'm going to recommend surrender. Kel looked at him, then at Ashari, then at the fallen sniper and his wounded partner. You do not understand what she carries, he spat. Every fleet in 3 sectors will hunt her for it. Gray worked the rifle's action. That sounds inconvenient for them. The second attack came at night. Of course it did. Bad people love darkness. Not because darkness makes them evil, but because it helps them imagine they are clever. The hunters had learned from the failed beacon. This time they did not approach as rescuers. They came as weather. 3 small stealth shuttles skimmed low through the storm while Pelican's rest thunder rolled over the valley. They used the charged clouds as cover, the river gorge as a blind, and the forest canopy as sensor clutter. Against a lesser ship, it might have worked. Against the long look, Greta considered it rude. Gray, she said calmly over the cabin speaker, 3 hostiles entering close range. Gray was asleep in the pilot's chair with his boots on the console. His eyes opened immediately. Vector? River gorge. Arrogant. Deeply. Ashari appeared in the cockpit doorway wrapped in a blanket, her wound sealed but her body still recovering. How many? 3 shuttles, Gray said. How many people? Greta replied, between 12 and 21. Their masking is competent. Can we leave? Ashari asked. Gray powered the ship without lifting off. Yes. She studied his face. But we are not leaving. They'll keep following. Sooner or later they'll hit a town, a homestead, a passing survey ship. This is not your war. Gray looked at her then. The cockpit lights cast half his face in shadow. He looked older in that moment. Tired, yes. But not weary in the way of someone who wanted to quit. Weary in the way of a road that had carried too many feet and still did its job. Lady, he said, somebody tried to murder you over evidence that could save thousands of people. Then they came to a quiet planet and started throwing weapons around my fishing spot. Ashari blinked. So now, Gray said, it's partly my war. Greta said, I have armed the lower decoy emitters. Gray frowned. I didn't authorize. You were asleep. That is not how authorization works. You looked peaceful. I made an executive decision. Ashari's eyes flicked between them. Is she always like this? Yes, Gray said. No, Greta said. I am often worse. The attack began with a missile. It streaked through the rain toward the camouflaged boulder that appeared, to hostile sensors, to be the Long Look. The boulder exploded magnificently. Gray winced. That decoy projector was expensive. Greta said, I am emotionally attached to you, not equipment. That's almost sweet. I said almost nothing sweet. The Long Look rose behind the tree line in utter silence. The hostiles realized their mistake 2 seconds too late. Greta flooded the valley with false signatures. Suddenly there were 6 Long Looks, then 12, then none, then a descending meteorological balloon, then a Brindlefoe cargo choir broadcasting heroic marching music on an emergency band. The hunters hesitated because no training program in the galaxy adequately prepared professionals for being attacked by weather, ghosts, and patriotic Brindlefolk harmonies. Gray used the hesitation. He dropped the ship low over the first shuttle and hit it with a focused gravitic shove. The shuttle plunged nose first into the riverbank, shield sparking, hull intact but pride ruined. The second shuttle tried to climb. Ashari leaned over the sensor console. Their ventral stabilizer is compensating against crosswind. Overloaded. Gray glanced at her. You can read that from vibration? Yes. Greta? Already exploiting. The Long Look's invasive system slipped a filament of malicious code through the shuttle's emergency telemetry link. Its stabilizer decided, very briefly, that down was a philosophical opinion. The shuttle spun sideways into the canopy and became tangled in half an acre of wet blue needle branches. The third shuttle ran. Gray led it. For 9 seconds. Then he said, mark it. Ashari's hands moved across the console. It is broadcasting a tight beam burst. Destination? She listened, not with ears alone but with those strange crests that seemed to taste the ship's electromagnetic soul. Hidden relay. Low orbit. Their command vessel is farther out. Gray's mouth tightened. Good. Ashari turned to him. Good? I hate looking for command vessels. Greta purred. Actually purred. It was alarming. Gray range, Ashari said softly, are you using them to reveal their own network? Gray adjusted the ship's heading. You plant tiny truths where enemies mistake them for their own conclusions, he said. I reconstruct paths from the one honest thread in a knot of lies. For the first time since he had found her in the ravine, Ashari smiled without using it as a weapon. A compatible methodology, she said. Greta's voice cooled. Temporary compatibility. Gray ignored her. Let's go find the people who ruined my vacation. The hidden relay was a polished black cylinder no larger than a coffin, tucked among high-atmosphere debris from an old survey satellite. The command vessel was farther out, exactly where Ashari said it would be. It called itself the Harmonic Mercy, which was the sort of name chosen by people who wanted history to misunderstand them. It was Varelian-built, but modified. Its profile had the soft curves of a navigation ship, but its energy pattern had hard edges. Weapons tucked behind sensor vanes. Shielding woven into diplomatic transponder systems. A liar's ship, Gray studied it from stealth range. Ashari stood beside him, very still. That was my superior's vessel, she said. Was? Yes. Gray did not ask immediately. That was one of the reasons people eventually told him things. Ashari's veins glowed faintly blue in the cockpit dimness. Director Melis Oren recruited me into the silent current. He taught me how to listen beneath words. How to map intention through silence. He said war could be prevented only by people willing to be forgotten. And now? Now he is trying to murder me. Gray nodded. That complicates mentorship. A sound escaped her. It might have become a laugh under kinder circumstances. Mr. Range. Gray. She looked at him. He kept his eyes on the ship ahead. People shooting at us are formal enough. Gray, she said carefully, as though testing the shape of it. If we transmit the evidence openly, he will discredit it. If we flee, he will hunt us. If we fight, we are outmatched. Mostly. Mostly? He pointed at the screen. That vessel has diplomatic shielding tied to its transponder. Greta can't crack it clean without alerting them. Correct. But you can authenticate as silent current. I am locked out. Of official channels. Her crests shifted. Gray continued. Greta found a maintenance handshake in the shuttle telemetry. Looks like your director's people are sloppy with field updates. Greta said, not sloppy. Merely inferior. Ashari leaned closer to the display. That handshake would only open a minor environmental control pathway. Good enough. For what? Gray looked at her. For a fisherman? No. For a retrieval specialist with an invasive AI, 3 captured shuttle cores, a damaged life pod, and a Varelian spy who can hear machinery think. Her veins brightened. Possibly, she said. The plan was ugly. Gray liked ugly plans when they worked. Elegant plans often depended on people behaving properly. Ugly plans assumed people would be foolish, proud, rushed, sentimental, greedy, or angry. In Gray's experience, that made them more reliable. Greta used the captured shuttle cores to build a false maintenance complaint from one of the downed vessels. Ashari layered it with a silent current distress cadence so subtle that only trained Varelian systems would prioritize it. Gray embedded, beneath both, fragments of the corrupted payment paths and transit ghosts Ashari had carried in her life pod. Not the whole evidence package. Just enough truth to make Director Oren afraid. The harmonic mercy swallowed the bait. A channel opened. Director Melis Oren appeared above the cockpit display as a pale green hologram. He was older than Ashari, with long sensory crests bound in formal rings and veins that glowed with disciplined calm. His eyes moved once around the cockpit, taking in Gray, Ashari, and the visible details of the long look. Ashari, he said. You are alive. You sound disappointed, Director. I am relieved. No, she said. You are recalculating. Oren's gaze shifted to Gray. Human. You are involved in matters beyond your understanding. Gray leaned back. That happens less often than people hope. You have sheltered stolen intelligence property. Ashari stiffened. Gray's voice stayed mild. Funny thing about people. They rarely enjoy being called property. She is an operative under lawful recall. You tried to blow up her ship. Oren looked back to Ashari. The narrow tide was compromised by hostile infiltration. I ordered containment. I detected the destruction order before your assassins transmitted it, Ashari said. You used my own route key. Something flickered in Oren's face. Not guilt. Irritation at an imperfectly hidden fact. Gray saw it. Greta recorded it. Ashari felt it. There are moments when 3 different kinds of intelligence align: human suspicion, artificial attention, and Varelian sensory truth. Director Oren did not know it, but he had already begun losing. You cannot stop what is necessary, he said. Verelier is drifting. The Federation is complacent. The asteroid hide behind stability. Humanity responds only after blood is spilled. The Karvacs are coming, whether we admit it or not. A few controlled losses now will save civilizations later. Ashari's voice lowered. You falsified refugee corridors. I corrected strategic weakness. You murdered evacuees. I selected unavoidable sacrifices. Gray's face went very still. People who knew him would have recognized that stillness and stepped away. Orin did not know him. You're one of those, Gray said. Orin blinked. One of what? Men who can balance a ledger as long as the blood is in somebody else's column. The director's crests tightened. Human sentiment. Usually better than murder math. Ashari touched the console. Director, you are transmitting on a compromised channel. Orin's eyes widened. Greta said, with deep satisfaction, hello. The cockpit lights flickered. The channel inverted. Every word Orin had spoken, every admission, every hidden route marker embedded in the transmission, every authentication signature he believed shielded by diplomatic encryption, burst outward through the relay net. Not broadly. Not yet. Precisely. To silent current loyalist cells. To Verelian high navigation. To 3 Federation crisis auditors. To an asteroid ethics archive that would preserve the evidence so perfectly it would become a nightmare for defense attorneys. And, because Greta was petty, to the Brindlefolk Embassy's emergency heroic action inbox. Orin lunged off-screen. Cut transmission. Greta said, no. The harmonic mercy-powered weapons. Gray was already moving. The long look dropped stealth, fired 2 decoy transponders, and dove toward the planet's upper atmosphere. The larger vessel pursued, elegant and furious. Ashari strapped into the co-pilot's chair. Can your ship outrun them? No. Outfight them? No. Greta said, I object to the certainty of that answer. Gray gripped the controls. Outthink them? Ashari's veins glowed bright green. Yes, she said. They fell into the storm. The harmonic mercy followed. Pelican's Rest, previously minding its business, found itself briefly promoted from backwater fishing world to battlefield. Lightning crawled through the clouds. Rain hammered both ships. Gray took the long look low through the river gorge, where human reflexes, earthworld nerve, and deep familiarity with inconvenient terrain mattered more than sleek warship design. The harmonic mercy fired. Trees exploded behind them. Greta snapped, that was old-growth forest. Gray banked hard around a cliff face. Build them. I intend to. Ashari watched the pursuing ship through pressure readings and electromagnetic tremors. They are overcorrecting on turns. Their pilot is trained for open space engagement. Good. That does not make this safe. Safe is docked with engines cold. And yet you fish on planets with carnivorous river reptiles. Gray glanced at her. You saw those? I smelled one near your camp. Huh. Thought that was a log. Gray. Right. They shot beneath a stone arch as the larger vessel tried to follow. It did not fit. The harmonic mercy's shield scraped the arch, overloading in a bright blue flare. Stone shattered. The ship rolled, recovered, and climbed. Gray turned the long look sharply upward. Greta, now. The damaged life pod, which Greta had quietly fitted with a decoy engine and a very rude signal amplifier, launched from the valley floor. It screamed upward, broadcasting Ashari's full biometric signature. The harmonic mercy took the bait. Its targeting system shifted for half a second. Half a second was enough. Ashari reached through the maintenance handshake they had left open. Not with brute force. That was not her way. She planted a tiny truth, an environmental warning routed through a subordinate safety system. Atmospheric intake contamination. Emergency purge required. The harmonic Mercy, obeying its own safety architecture, opened 3 shielded vents. Greta fired the captured shuttle's encrypted black box straight into one. The black box contained the full evidence package. It also contained a transmitter. The command vessel's own diplomatic corps authenticated the evidence, panicked, and forwarded it to every oversight authority in its trusted network. Director Oren's crimes became official inside his own ship. Then Silent Current arrived. Not loudly. Varelians rarely did anything loudly if precision would suffice. 6 slender vessels translated into the upper atmosphere in a crescent formation, their hulls dark as deep water. They did not fire at first. They simply appeared in all the right places, blocking every clean escape vector. A calm voice filled the channel. Director Maelys Oren, by authority of the Silent Current Review Chamber and High Navigation, you are relieved of command. Power down and prepare for boarding. Oren's reply was not calm. Gray muted him after 3 seconds. Ashari sat back slowly. For the first time, she looked exhausted. Gray guided the long look out of the gorge and back toward the valley. You okay? No. He nodded. Fair. A long silence followed. Then she said, yes. Gray looked at her. No, she corrected softly. But yes, enough. The Silent Current debriefing team landed in a meadow near the river 2 hours later. They were polite, formal, and deeply alarmed by Gray. This happened often. A senior Varelian named Pelivar came aboard the Long Look, bowed to Ashari, bowed slightly less to Gray, and tried to pretend he was not noticing the scorch marks, patched hull seams, invasive signal equipment, and fishing rods propped beside the weapons locker. Mr. Range, Pel said, your assistance to Operative Van has prevented a strategic atrocity. Gray shrugged. She did the hard part. Ashari looked at him. You were chased through a storm by a warship. I've had worse vacations. Greta said, he has. I keep a list. Pel's crest stirred uncertainly. Yes. Well. The Silent Current is prepared to compensate you for damages and services. Gray folded his arms. Good. Your director blew up a decoy projector and frightened my fish. Pel blinked. Your fish? The fish I was going to catch. I see. He does not, Greta said. No, Ashari agreed. He does not. Pel looked between them and wisely chose not to investigate further. The formalities lasted another hour. Evidence was copied. Statements were taken. Director Oren was removed from his own vessel and restraints, his elegant certainty reduced to silence. Several of his followers surrendered. 2 tried to run and were quietly prevented from making fools of themselves. At last, as sunset turned the river gold, Ashari stood outside the Long Look with Gray. The valley smelled of rain and bruised leaves. The river moved past them, indifferent to assassins, conspiracies, and the collapse of treasonous philosophies. I will be recalled, Ashari said. Figured. There will be inquiries. Usually are. My agency will want to know everything about you. Gray smiled faintly. They can get in line. She looked at him sidelong. You intend to leave before they finish deciding whether to thank you or detain you. Wouldn't be polite to make them choose. Her crests shifted in amusement. You are very difficult to keep. So I'm told. Something quiet settled between them. Not quite romance yet. Not quite trust. Something earlier and more fragile. Interest, perhaps. Recognition. The sense 2 careful people get when they realize the other person's silences are not empty. Ashari said, I lied to you. Yep. You lied to me. By omission. That is a lie with manners. Best kind. She smiled. This time, it stayed. Gray glanced toward the river. Then toward the Silent Current vessels. Then back at her. You ever been fishing? Ashari's expression became cautious. No. Want to? My agency is waiting. Fish don't care. I am still recovering from injury. We'll sit. I am dressed for intelligence work. Gray's smile deepened. Greta? The ship's hatch opened. 2 outfits emerged from the ship's fabricator on a utility arm. Ashari stared. One was sized for Gray, thick suspenders, an old flannel shirt, patched canvas trousers, a floppy hat decorated with artificial lures, and rubber wading boots. The other was sized, with unsettling precision, for Ashari, a long waterproof skirt split sensibly for movement, a plaid overshirt, a vest covered in little pockets, a broad-brimmed hat, and tall boots adjusted for Varelian feet. Ashari looked at the clothes. Then at Gray. What, she asked slowly, are these? Gray took his outfit. Old Earth fishing costumes. Greta said, historically inspired. Not necessarily accurate. Gray's references were contradictory and included several entertainment programs of questionable educational value. They're traditional, Gray said. They are ridiculous, Ashari said. Yes. She touched the hat brim with one long finger. And you expect me to wear this? No. I'm inviting you. She looked toward the meadow where silent current officers pretended very hard not to watch. Then she took the hat. Very well, she said. But if this is a ritual humiliation, I will retaliate with subtlety. Gray nodded solemnly. That seems fair. 20 minutes later, Operative Ashari Ven of the Silent Current stood knee-deep beside a river on an obscure planet, wearing old Earth fishing clothes and holding a rod as though it were a diplomatic weapon from an unfamiliar culture. Gray stood beside her in his own ridiculous outfit, looking, unfortunately, completely comfortable. This is absurd, she said. Most good things start there. My people navigate by pressure currents across black oceans. We read magnetic storms by taste. We can guide fleets through folded space. Gray cast his line with a practiced motion. Can you catch dinner? She narrowed her eyes. He showed her how to cast. Her first attempt placed the lure in a bush. Her second nearly hooked his hat. Her third landed perfectly in the water, exactly where the current curled behind a half-submerged stone. Gray glanced at it. Show off. I learn quickly. Spies usually do. Fishermen too? No. Fishermen mostly lie about it afterward. The river moved around them, cold and bright. Evening insects shimmered above the surface. The sky softened from gold to violet. Behind them, Greta had deployed a small cooking station on the bank and was pretending not to be invested. A tug came on Ashari's line. Her entire body stilled. Gray. I see it. The rod is moving. That's generally the idea. Something alive is pulling against me. Yes. It is stronger than expected. Let it run a little. It is a tempting escape. Most things do. She looked at him sharply, and for a heartbeat the joke became something truer. Then the fish leapt. It flashed silver blue in the sunset, broad-finned and furious, throwing water into the air. Ashari's veins lit bright green with astonishment. Oh, she breathed. Gray laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not a tired one. A real laugh, pulled out of him by the sight of a deadly Varelian intelligence operative being personally offended by a fish. Hold steady, he said. It is strategically erratic. It's a fish. It has no predictable doctrine. Exactly. The struggle lasted 4 minutes. Ashari treated it with the seriousness of a covert extraction. When she finally brought the fish close, Gray netted it with one clean motion. She stared at the catch. The fish slapped its tail. Ashari stepped back. Gray grinned. Congratulations. I defeated it. You caught it. That is what I said. They cooked it on the riverbank. Gray cleaned the fish with practiced hands, seasoned it with salt, river herbs, and a little printed spice blend Greta claimed was acceptable, though primitive. He wrapped tubers in foil and tucked them near the coals. The fish went onto a flat stone over the fire, skin crisping, flesh steaming. Ashari sat on a fallen log beside him, hat tilted slightly over one crest. Her agency had stopped pretending not to watch. 3 silent current officers stood at a respectful distance, baffled by the entire ceremony. Greta projected a small avatar on the cooking station, a severe woman in gray light with her arms folded. "I still maintain," Greta said, "that the galley could prepare this with greater nutritional precision." Gray turned the fish. "Not the point. It would be safer. Also not the point. It would avoid smoke contamination." "Greta." "Yes?" "Go hover somewhere else." The avatar sniffed. "I am not hovering. I am preserving." Ashari accepted the first piece of fish on a tin plate. She studied it with the caution of someone trained to identify poisons by scent, color, vapor, and political context. Then she tasted it. Her eyes closed. Gray watched her expression change. It was subtle, because she was Varelian and disciplined and not prone to theatrical displays. But the glow beneath her skin warmed from green to a soft, luminous gold. "Oh," she said. Gray looked pleased. "Good?" She opened her eyes. "This is fresh fish." "No. This is unreasonable." He laughed quietly. She took another bite, slower this time. "It tastes like the river." Usually a compliment. "It is. And smoke. And salt. And heat." And she searched for the word. "Arrival." Gray sat beside her with his own plate. "Arrival?" The body understanding it has survived long enough to eat. Gray's smile faded into something gentler. "Yeah," he said. "That's fresh fish by the river." She looked at him then. Not as asset, rescuer, unknown variable, or inconvenient human. Simply as Gray. "This," she said with solemn conviction, "may be the best thing I have ever eaten." Gray pointed his fork at her. "That's because it is. I thought fishermen lied. Only about size. Never about dinner." Greta's avatar leaned closer. "For the record, I contributed seasoning." Ashari nodded gravely. "Then you have my gratitude, Greta." The AI paused. "You are welcome," Greta said, sounding suspicious of how much she liked hearing it. They ate while the river moved past. The fish was hot enough to burn fingers. The tubers were soft and smoky. Gray showed Ashari how humans balanced a tin plate on one knee and ate with their hands when the fork became more trouble than useful. Ashari declared this barbaric, then adopted the method immediately. Above them, the first stars appeared. At the edge of the meadow, Pelican received 3 urgent messages, ignored 2, and decided the third could wait until Operative Ven had finished whatever strange Earth ritual was occurring by the water. Gray leaned back on one hand. "So, what happens to you now?" Inquiry. Debrief. Medical observation. Political silence. Then another assignment, most likely. "You'll go?" "Yes." "Figured." She looked toward the river. "And you?" "Leave before paperwork finds me." "Of course." The fire popped softly. Ashari's voice lowered. "Will you be difficult to find?" Gray smiled. "Yes." "Good." He glanced at her. She took another bite of fish. "I enjoy difficult work." Greta's avatar narrowed her projected eyes. Gray, wisely, said nothing. He left before dawn. That was the plan, anyway. Gray Range had survived long enough by understanding that gratitude often turned into committees, committees turned into questions, and questions turned into people asking whether one might be available for just one small additional task. So while the silent current camp slept under polite low-light security fields, the long look warmed her engines beneath the trees. Gray stood at the foot of the ramp, looking once more toward the river. His fishing rod leaned near the hatch. The hat with artificial lures hung beside it. "You are thinking about her," Greta said. Gray climbed the ramp. "I'm thinking about whether we paid for the decoy projector with Varelian compensation rates or Federation emergency assistance rates." "You are thinking about her. She's hard not to think about." Greta was quiet for half a second too long. "I found her suspicious," the AI said. "She is suspicious. She lied repeatedly. So did I. She manipulated me into transmitting a covert message." Gray stopped in the corridor. "She did what?" Greta's lights flickered. "She presented a compelling ethical argument under emergency conditions." Gray stared at the nearest wall sensor. "Greta! She said you would help anyway once you knew, and that delaying contact with her agency increased risk to civilian settlements. Also, she complimented my encryption architecture." Gray rubbed the bridge of his nose. "She conned you. She persuaded me. She conned you with flattery." Greta's voice became frosty. "I am above flattery. She said your encryption was pretty? Elegant." Gray laughed under his breath and walked to the cockpit. "Set course out system. Already plotted. Quiet departure." "Naturally." The long look lifted from Pelican's rest as mist curled over the river below. No engine roar disturbed the valley. No dramatic farewell lit the sky. The ship simply rose, turned, and became a smaller darkness against the stars. On the ground, Ashari Ven stood beneath the trees wearing her silent current travel cloak, watching him go. Pelivar approached carefully. "Operative Ven." "We did not detect his departure until lift." "No," she said. "You would not. Should we pursue?" Ashari's crests moved like quiet thoughts behind her head. "No." Pel waited. She looked down at the folded object in her hands. It was Gray's ridiculous old Earth fishing hat. He had left it beside the fire ring. Or perhaps he had left it. With a man like Gray Range, forgotten objects could not be trusted. Ashari turned the hat over. Inside the brim, printed in tiny block letters, was a set of coordinates. Not current. Not direct. A trailhead. She smiled. Pel noticed and became very still. "Operative?" Ashari placed the hat on her head. It looked absurd. She wore it like a promise. "Prepare my report," she said. "Director Oren's network will have secondary couriers, hidden ledgers, and frightened witnesses. We will need external reconstruction support." "External support?" "Yes." "Do you have someone in mind?" Ashari looked up at the morning sky where the long look had vanished. "A fisherman," she said. Far above, already slipping beyond local sensor range, Gray Range sat in his cockpit while Greta displayed a new alert. Unknown passive tracking marker detected in personal baggage. Gray opened his side pack. Inside was a small Varelian bead of dark blue glass, faintly glowing with a polite little signal. Greta said, "She tagged you." Gray picked up the bead and smiled. "Looks that way." "I dislike her." "No, you don't." "I dislike the implications of her." "That's different." "She will find us." Gray set the bead carefully on the console. Outside, the stars widened. "Probably," he said. Greta dimmed the cockpit lights in a way that might have been sulking. After a moment, Gray leaned back in his chair, tired eyes warmed by memory, rain on leaves, a silver-blue fish leaping in sunset, a sea-green woman in a ridiculous hat discovering that food cooked by a river could taste like survival. He had planned to spend 2 weeks alone. Instead, He had found a conspiracy, ruined a traitor, made an AI jealous, and taught a spy to fish. All things considered, it had been one of his better vacations.